Yes, my name is Robert Porter, and I'm in the Dallas area. And this is addressed to an issue that Tom brought up on pricing. My background's in telecommunications. When I got out of school, we got a bill from Southwestern Bell, from AT&T, and they charged for every single long-distance call we made. Today we have a subscription service, and I'm wondering if the subscription model might be one that provides an opportunity for us to get more funds to support our infrastructure by moving to paying $200 a month for transportation instead of tolls and car payments.
Yeah, you've raised a good point. We have to find a new way to fund transportation. As you know, if we shift to electrification, the gas tax is not going to do much for us. But I think that as folks move to become mobility consumers and the fleets are handled by the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, it will be easier to impose something like a vehicle miles traveled charge to provide a steady funding stream for to maintain our transportation infrastructure. So that shift where you have big companies supplying mobility fleets and you and I subscribing to mobility. So I know they're pioneering in the UK, Finland, and now Singapore, where you can have subscription plans to access mobility in your region. Low cost, you get a lot of transit and a little bit of shared mobility. Higher cost plan, you get more shared mobility and transit. And the highest yet, you get access to privately driven vehicles plus transit. I could see that happening, and again, offering more choices to our consumers. So,
just to build on that, I think it's also a one payment. It's a subscription one payment that gives you the opportunity to use a variety of services. So whether it's that app that links everything together and you can pay for your transit, you can pay for your Lyft, Uber, you can pay for parking that day if you need to drive. So it's that sort of one, just as you say, one easy way to do things that takes care of all your travel needs as part of that process too, I think.
Just another note on that is that the city of Boston actually is piloting a mobility as a service platform. Yeah, it's the first one in the United States.
Question.
Hi, I'm Julie Lorenz. And Katie, you raised, I think, a really important point, which is you can't predict the future. The best you can do is try to look ahead and prepare for lots of scenarios. So a question for both NCT COG and the Alliance, what sorts of scenario planning are you using as you look to the future to inform sort of the actions and strategies that you're trying to implement?
Something that we're doing with the Proving Grounds is asking each of the teams to identify the use case that they think is best suited for their environment. So rather than each of the cities piloting the exact same thing in the exact same way, is there a way which we can optimize the system where perhaps I-30 makes sense for freight platooning, perhaps El Paso makes sense to look at a port system. There's Austin's local arterial, and Arlington has the closed campus loop. And so trying to identify and prioritize the list of use cases and then match them to the most appropriate environment, match them to the research expertise that's needed is how we're thinking about it. On the data side, we're planning a data challenge, kind of beginning of the summit with some milestones over the course, and very similar. We've asked each of the teams to identify particular use case in which they would like to move forward with data. And so the single payment platform is a great example. Does it really make sense for every transit agency in Texas to develop its own universal payment platform? And to what degree do we get to the other side of that and it's no longer universal? And so can we identify who is best suited for that, help them take the lead, and then they're sharing their lessons learned and best practices with the others. After they go through that growing pain exercise, the others are able to draft off of that and really to scale and kind of adopt and leapfrog some of these other barriers. And kind of having multiple leads in multiple areas has really enabled the innovation and cross-collaboration.
And I'm challenged to do this where we're located, but we've engaged the University of Texas at Austin to give us some ranges of scenarios on axes like timing of adoption of automated vehicles, adoption rate of shared mobility, and then over the next year, we're going to run that through the travel demand models and whatnot to do some scenario planning. The other thing is just using this time as we know change is coming, is to do what College Station is doing, what we're trying to do in DFW is reimagine what you want your communities to look like, say, and really tackle the thing is our product is going to get worse if we follow our current business practices, so we have to change. So now's the time to ask the questions, and so we're working with FHWA, AMPO, other metropolitan planning organizations to just try to have that vigorous dialogue, and we think that over time what we need to do will emerge, and frankly a lot of the ideas will come from the private sector.
Roger Bell with TxDOT, and I guess in our work that we do, we see really the issue is the destination. The destination is a problem. Again, here, campus, and it's, you talked about the 30-mile trip is kind of focusing on that, but it's the million 30-mile trips, excuse me, that are creating the congestion. So I guess my question is, when we talk about transit and people wanting, I guess, asking people to use transit, but reason why people are in their car is that door-to-door service for that. So I guess for Tom and Katie, maybe, how can we address that issue of the destination be the problem and looking around of how to get everybody to that destination in a different way?
So you're right. I mean, that's the key issue, I think, is, we're, like game day, we're all willing to do something maybe on special occasions or we have more time, but on our daily commutes where we've got not only getting ourselves to and from work or school, but how do we deal with trip chaining when we're dropping off our child, or we're picking up our child, or we're running an errand. So I think that's the challenge. And when we did the charrette, that was one of the things that came up is, just as you say, how do we do that? And, is it park and ride? Is it some type of shared services, better ride sharing where people can pool trips so that we don't have as many 10-mile commutes by single occupant vehicles. So I don't think we have the solution. I think that's the big thing that everybody, including here, is wrestling with. Certainly if you can cut down trip distances, that helps. But as we see increased population growth, we're going to see continued longer trip lengths and those kinds of things. So I don't think there's an easy answer, but I think working together, we can come up with some different approaches to deal with that. Is it, satellite workstations? Is it telecommuting a couple days a week, or doing different types of things? So I think all of that is part of it. I think, just as we all know, and it came out strongly, is there's no, one single solution. It's trying to attack the issues and come up with things that all incrementally provide benefit for the final result. So I don't think we have the total answer. We don't have a single answer, but continuing to look, just as you say, at that issue is the key part of it.
Yeah, I think you're being put in a hard position, because I think we're doing 30-mile commutes because our policymakers and our agencies have built highways that can accommodate 30-mile commutes. And I think maybe the approach to transportation has to kind of shift from an emphasis on facilitating long-distance trips within metropolitan regions to prioritizing short trips. So it's a win when someone says, I can get to my office with a mile walk or bike ride rather than that 30-mile commute, because my city has, or this city has provided infrastructure that allows me to shop and work and go to school and handle the trip change within using transportation modes that again, support short distance trips. So if we change our priorities a bit from, again, facilitating distance and speed to facilitating shorter trips and give that same emphasis on infrastructure and services, that's probably the only way to really change that issue. Otherwise, we're going to just continue to have long distance trips, and we'll be able to watch cat videos while we're doing those long commutes. Thanks.
Jeff Miles with TxDOT. One of the things, as a young parent, I guess, with 3 kids, I mean, and I think Katie started to go towards that, and I think we've kind of discussed it here, is just the emphasis on the fact, I sat in on meetings and we're talking about Uber and Lyft. Well, according to, I'm not going to take my 3-year-old daughter in Uber because I don't think I can. On buses, I guess we can get away with that as far as that's concerned. But the point being is, I'm not sure, and the good part is that y'all are discussing, there's not a one-stop solution for all of these. But what I'm getting at is really kind of just moving forward with, I think another way to look at this is from the standpoint of, again, destinations. One of the things, as far as policy is concerned, TxDOT can do certain things, but I would say, and same thing with cities, but one of the things that would be a benefit, and I'd say this as a user plus parent, is having common destinations where it's got multiple things. And not only that, internal flow. I think internal flow is not discussed enough. Right? I go to a location, I'm trying to think of several spots in Bryan College Station where I can go, pull up, and there's really not a good place for me to take my 3 kids and walk from even one restaurant to, let's say, the ice cream shop or shopping, and creating these common destinations is getting a little bit better, but part of that comes down to policy in this. So the point being is it's a collaboration, and finding out what those different stakeholders, if I were a single individual and I didn't have kids, it'd be a different situation. The same thing with regard to commutes, looking at that situation. What happens if my kid comes down with sick? Well, can I jump on this? Can I get my kid in the car? Can I go to the doctor? And all those other things. And looking at that, but I just want to emphasize that. Then the one other aspect just to think about too is also we're in Texas. I love going to northern destinations where it's a little bit cooler more throughout the year. And I remember when I was at TTI, the discussion of using bikes to go from one end of the campus to the other. I love that idea. All of a sudden it's June, and I'm in a suit, and I want to go from one end of campus to the other. I'm probably not going to do that. So I just make the suggestion to take that into the model as well, to consider those things. There may be different climate regions which may require different solutions. So anyway.
So just to build on that real quickly, I mean, I agree with you totally, and it's, as we all go through different stages of the life cycle, when we don't have kids, when we have kids, when we have aging parents we need to deal with, there are a whole host of different things. So looking at that common destinations, school districts are a big influence on obviously where people live. So making sure from a policy perspective that we have good schools throughout the urban areas so that doesn't influence a decision to live further away potentially because the school districts are better, providing different kinds of options and better coordinating land use transportation, which we've always talked about is important, but continues to be a key element. So you're right; it's all those coming together that we need to continue to look at and to try to bring that cohesiveness together and try to address. Carolyn.
Yes. Hi, Katie. Thank you again. All 3 of you did a fantastic job in the presentation. My question, actually, you touched on it. A lot of discussion about innovation and transportation, but what, I feel that we're kind of missing is the other component which you just mentioned right now. It's land use, coordinating land use. We could talk about, all the innovations we're doing in transportation. A lot talked about short trips, facilitating short trips, people living, within walking distance to jobs. But if the land use is not facilitating that, we're still going to continue to see longer trips. For instance, on the freight side, we've seen a lot of, freight moving to the suburbs because that's where land is cheaper. They could build bigger, better warehousing. How do you, facilitate people living close to downtown where they can walk? So I think the conversation here, again, a question to you all is how, from all of your three perspectives, reaching out to land use planners, to those policy and decision makers at the local level, on the land use decisions, encouraging residential downtown, mixed use, to be able to facilitate that. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here 10 years from now, we're still going to be talking about 30-mile commute, 45-minute commute. So, Christy, Tom, and Katie, how in your efforts engaging those policymakers that really impact urban form, or where people live, where people work, where people commute, where people, recreate, socialize. How is that part of all of this?
Great question, and I think people have talked about collaboration in an atmosphere of uncertainty, and that's really communication. I think what would be really refreshing, no one is saying that folks who build roads and operate them have to solve all these problems. But what I think you can do is participate in the dialogue with some data. So you're asked to build a highway with no sidewalks that extends into agricultural land. Well, in your, as part of your design work and whatnot, you make it known to the policymakers that on this road as designed, given current things, you're going to have X number of fatalities, you're going to have this much impermeable land use that will come with that highway, and you'll have these consequences. And just point that there may be alternatives. Similarly with technology, eventually we're going to come to a point when the decision whether to widen a road or add capacity using technology add-ons, those will become viable choices. It's up to you to bring to the decision makers, well, maybe we don't have to blow through an urban neighborhood to add a lane. Maybe with a dedicated lane for automated vehicles, we can get the same capacity increase from this highway corridor. So I think it's up to you to, again, inform and point out there are alternatives to the standard way of doing business. And then that's the best you can do. Contribute to the dialogue. Thank you.
And then I also think in reaching out to the public that there's a behavioral shift, and trying to understand what it takes to change behavior is really important. And like Tom said, having it being supported by data. Something that we've looked at is on the healthcare side. Something that they do very well is this idea of case management, where if somebody misses their medical appointment, there's a system in place to follow up. And it's interesting to think about if we were to apply that same thing to the transportation field, where why are people choosing to continue to drive alone? And is there a way in which we can reach out to people to help us understand how do we provide and create a transit system that helps you to get to work, that helps you to be able to take your kids to school, go by the daycare, get them to soccer practice, to really think about it from a person's perspective and all of the activities that take place there.
The one component I'd also add to that is that making sure we're reaching out to the development community, the developers. I mean, they follow the zoning, they follow the planning, they follow the land use, but they're ultimately the ones that are designing and putting things in. And I think here and really throughout the country, people are recognizing that making sure those developments incorporate different elements of building close to a transit station or making sure that they're providing walkways and links is becoming more important. We're certainly seeing that here, as was mentioned. If you can't go from your hotel to a restaurant because there are no sidewalks, I mean, that's just stupid. So, how we make sure that they're part of that discussion and that they're incorporating and potentially providing some resources to make sure those things happen, I think is important. And then, as was mentioned, I mean, here, obviously, when it's hot in the summer, making sure we've got at least some shaded areas that people can walk, or maybe you put in some misters, or, you know, there are ways that you can at least make that, especially a short walk, more manageable and more enjoyable, so that you don't have to get into your car just to go 2 blocks to a restaurant, but you have a safe, easy way to navigate to get there. So it's I think that's the development community that has the resources and are ultimately going to be the ones that are benefiting by obviously making money off of rents or restaurants or those kinds of things, are a key part of that dialogue.
And if I could just add a quick data point, we've had multiple major national developers approach us asking ways that they can incorporate automated vehicles in their office campuses as a way to, again, provide amenities for their employees, but also as part of a strategy to reduce the need to supply parking. They'd rather build office buildings that produce revenue for them and tax revenue for the municipalities rather than parking lots. So we're seeing a lot of interest in automated vehicles from those developers, and that may be a helpful data point.
Yeah, my name is Muhammad Al-Hawil. I'm with TaxDOT Fort Worth District. Actually, just I lived over the last 25 years in the Metroplex, and I have seen us, starting different things, and we thought it's going to be the solution for our problems like HOV lanes and ITS and different things, and they solved some problems. They solved like 5 to 8% of our problems during the rush hours and the peak hours. And so what advice do you really make? And this question for the three of you here. What advice or recommendation you can give our senior leadership? We have them here in the room. They have $70 billion to allocate for the next 10 years, or the COG, $120 billion for the regional level. So what will be the right mix of resource allocation regarding funding, policy changes, roles and responsibilities at the state, regional, and local level to make sure that we will have the right response or the right rate of change from where we are today to where we want it to go in the future? Because sometimes it looks like we are shifting from one extreme to another. So if you can speak to any kind of recommendations or advice about the right rate of change in implementing all this new technology, because we need to accommodate the other maybe 90+% of those people who are driving the 30 and 40 mile an hour, and they wanted 75 mile an hour, and wanted the shortest time from point A to point B. Thank you.
I would say 2 things. One is that ask your leadership to ask you to rigorously make the case for why you are physically expanding roadways and not using technology. So for now, physical expansion using concrete is probably going to win. But at some point, it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 15, the equation is going to change. And so I think asking very rigorously that question, again, concrete versus technology solutions, is an important thing your leadership can do. The second thing is what can you do in the culture to say, every trip is a good trip and short trips are better? So what are you doing as a district to facilitate short distance travel using non-automobile means to get around? How are you using the full range of mobility options to solve problems? So those would be the 2 things I would say.
I think just to maybe add on that a little bit, I personally, obviously, we're biased here in Texas, but I think Texas is a good example of an approach that's being taken. You heard about the different level activities going on at the state level, the different groups coming together. I mean, we're a state, we're a group that works pretty well together, shares experience. I think we're building on that with these initiatives. TxDOT's funding some innovative projects over the years, looking at technology, allocating resources to that, while at the same time addressing the top 100, the critical issues that we know are out there and aren't going to go away. So it's a mix of all those. I think it's, as we all know, it's no one single solution. There isn't a silver bullet out there, at least not right now. And so, continuing to be that collaborative, incubator of interested people, interested ideas, and continuing to push the envelope within a setting that's appropriate for public agencies, working with private sector groups that might be able to push it a little bit more. I think it's a great time right now to do some really innovative things, and I think that Texas is really on the forefront of, along with maybe Michigan, California, a couple other states, in really trying to do that.
And then I'll just add on with the timing that Texas is ripe for innovation, and how do we reach that proof of concept level? Something that we've heard is that the agencies across Texas, they want less talk and more action. They're ready for deployment. It might be messy at first, but we need to go through the exercise of understanding and learning and moving forward.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank the audience for your questions after the presentations. I think the discussion was very informative and very interesting, and I want to ask you to help me thank our presenters. I think they all did an excellent job.